If you've ever genuinely wanted to change your relationship with food and still found yourself stuck, you are not broken. You are not weak. Today, I want to talk about why change feels so hard, even when every part of you wants it. What if there's an explanation that has nothing to do with willpower and has everything to do with how your brain actually works? Welcome to Binge Eating Breakthrough, the podcast to help you stop feeling out of control around food and build trust with your body. If you've tried everything but still feel stuck, you're not alone. I've been there too. I'm Jane Pilger, and I'm here to help you see binge eating in a new way so you can finally break free. Each week, you'll get the tools and insights to create peace with food and your body. Your breakthrough starts now. Hello, trusted listener. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you're here not looking for someone to tell you to try harder. I trust that you already know how to try hard and that you've been doing that for a really long time. I trust that if sheer effort and determination were enough, you would have figured this whole thing out a long time ago. And I also trust that somewhere underneath the frustration, there is still a part of you that believes something different is possible, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening. So today I want to talk about something that I think gets misunderstood more than a lot of things in this work. And that is this: why change feels so hard, even when you want it. Because here's what I hear from so many people. They say, I want to stop binging. I want to have a different relationship with food. I really do. I know it's not helping me. I know what to do, but I can't seem to make myself do the things consistently. And I don't understand why. We talked about this a little bit in a previous episode. When you know what to do, but you can't make yourself do it. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go check that one out when you're done with this one. And here's what happens. Almost without fail, people land on some version of the same conclusion. Something must be wrong with me. And I get it. I have been there so many times. From the very first time I binged, I truly believed there was something wrong with me. But I want to offer you a different way of looking at this today. This isn't going to be a pep talk or you've got this in a list of the top 5 strategies to implement. This is going to be an actual explanation for what is happening. Because when you understand, something loosens. You start to feel a shift. Something that has felt personal starts to feel a little more like information. So let's start with this. Why we often assume that change should be easy. We live in a culture that treats change like it's a decision. You decide to change. You commit. You follow through. And if you don't follow through, well, you just didn't want it badly enough, or you weren't disciplined enough, or you need a better plan. Now, this framing, which you will find all over the internet, all kinds of podcasts that will tell you to do these things, it puts all of the responsibility on your conscious thinking mind, the part of you that set the intention. The part of you that woke up Monday morning and said, this is it, this week, today is going to be different. And I'm not saying that that part of you doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But it's one part. And it's not the only part of you that has a vote in what you do. So this is what I talked about in that episode, the moment when you know what to do and you still can't make yourself do it. That gap between knowing and doing. And what we're going to do today is go deeper on why that gap exists in the first place. It's not random. It's not weakness. There is a very specific explanation. So let's talk about the brain. And here's what I want you to understand. Your brain's primary job, its number one priority. It's not your happiness. It's not your goals. And it's not your growth. It's your survival. Specifically, keeping you safe by keeping things predictable. Your brain is pattern seeking. It notices what you do repeatedly, and it begins to automate those patterns. Not because it wants to trap you, but because automation is efficient. The more something becomes automatic, the less energy your brain has to spend on it. And that freed up energy can go towards other things. The brain's primary motivation are to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and use as little energy as possible. So when it can automate, it is using as little energy as possible. So think back when you learned to drive. At first, every single thing required your full attention. The mirrors, the gas pedal, the turn signals, other cars, navigating traffic. It was exhausting. For me, I wasn't even allowed to drive at night for a long time because that added just another layer of something else to think about, the difference in distance between cars when it was dark. But now, for most of you, if you've been driving for a while, you can drive a familiar route. You can get to your destination without even remembering the drive. Your brain automated it. And this is beautiful. It's a beautiful system until the pattern that got automated is one that you're now trying to change. Because here's what happens when you try to change an established pattern. Your brain registers the deviation as unfamiliar. And unfamiliar, even when it's better, can feel threatening. Not threatening in the way that a bus coming towards you feels threatening, but threatening in the sense of, wait a second, this isn't what we usually do. I don't know what happens next. I'm not sure this is safe. And when your brain isn't sure that something is safe, it pulls you back towards what it knows, even if what it knows isn't serving you. And part of it is this. When you go towards food, food has over time become a source of safety. So when you try to change your relationship with food, when you try to respond differently to an urge to binge, or sit with an uncomfortable feeling instead of eating, or eat in a way that's different from how you've eaten for years, and something in you resists, it's like, wait a second, that doesn't feel safe. It has felt safe to go to food, to use food in these ways. So the resistance isn't a character flaw. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. So this is where I want to bring in something that is really important. The part of you that resists change. It's not the enemy. It's not the problem. It's a part of you that has been working really hard for a very long time to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to listen to it unconditionally. It doesn't mean we can't change, but it does mean that if you approach that resistant part with frustration and force, if you try to override it with willpower and white knuckle through it, you are likely to find that it pushes back harder. Because parts that feel threatened don't respond well to being steamrolled. They dig in. What they respond to, what the nervous system responds to, is safety, slowness, kindness, evidence built over time that the new thing is actually okay, that it's safe. Now, there's another layer to this that I want to talk about, and it has to do with how change actually happens in the brain. So we talk about habits, we talk about patterns, and what's happening underneath those patterns is that your brain has built strong neural pathways, literal connections between neurons that fire together because they have fired together many times before. I'm sure you've heard the term, what fires together, wires together. So the more a pattern repeats, the more established that pathway becomes. So you can picture this like a path through the woods, a well-worn path that has been walked hundreds, maybe thousands of times. The trees and the brush on either side of this path have been pushed back. The ground is packed down. It's clear. You can see exactly where this path goes. You can walk it without thinking, without looking down, without effort. That is your established pattern. Now, imagine that you need to go somewhere new, somewhere that worn path doesn't lead. So you step off of it and into the brush. You're making your own way. The ground is uneven. The plants push back. There may be some stickers, some weeds in there. You can't always see where you're going. You have to look down, pay attention, move slowly. It takes real effort just to take a few steps. This is what creating a new neural pathway feels like. And it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's new. Nobody has walked it yet. And your brain, whose job is efficiency, keeps noticing that old path is right there. It's clear, it's familiar, it's easy, and it keeps suggesting you go back. This is why change feels so effortful in the beginning. You are not failing, you're forging. And here's the part I really want you to hold on to, because I think it's one of the most important things I can tell you about this process. Change often happens before you can see it. You might start asking yourself different questions when an urge to eat comes up. You might notice what's happening in your body a few seconds before you used to. You might pause, even briefly, where you didn't pause before. And then you eat anyway. So you think because you ate, you think, nothing is changing. Nothing is happening. I will never figure this out. But something is happening. It's just happening underground. So think of it like planting a seed. You put it in the soil. You water it. And then nothing. At least nothing you can see. It looks the same on the surface day after day. It looks like nothing. It's easy to assume in that waiting period, to assume that nothing is growing, that it didn't take, that you should try something else. But underneath the soil, roots are forming. The work is happening. It's just not visible yet. I think about this a lot in connection with the word cultivate. And cultivate is actually the name of my group coaching program, because that is exactly what this work is. We are cultivating a new relationship with food and with ourselves. And cultivation requires tending something you can't always see yet. It requires trusting that what you're doing is working, even when the surface looks the same. The people who make lasting change are not always the ones who had the most dramatic breakthroughs early on. They're often the ones who kept watering the seed, who didn't abandon the new path just because it was hard to walk. They gave the roots time to take hold before expecting to see something bloom. Because eventually, and I have watched this happen more times than I can count, something does bloom. One day you respond to a hard moment differently. You're not even sure when that became possible. One day, the pull toward the old path, it's a little quieter. One day you look around and you realize something has grown that wasn't there before. Now, understanding this doesn't make change easy, but it does make it make sense. And when something makes sense, it's a lot easier to keep going. So I want to add another layer here because I think this is really important. If you have been trying to change your relationship with food for a long time, and that change hasn't stuck, you have probably accumulated a significant amount of shame around that. A belief, whether you say it out loud or not, that you should be further along by now, that other people manage this, that there's something about you specifically that makes this harder for you than it is for everyone else. And shame, as I talk about often, is not a motivator. I know it can feel like it is. And I know that there's a part that thinks if I feel bad enough about this, I will finally change. But what shame actually does is activate the threat response in your nervous system. It signals danger. And when your nervous system is in threat mode, you don't have access to the learning, the curiosity, and experimentation that change requires. Shame slows change down. It keeps you in survival mode, which is the very mode that pulls you back toward your familiar patterns. So if you have been trying to change and trying to shame yourself into changing at the same time, you have been working against yourself in a really fundamental way. And it's not your fault. Of course, this is not intentional. You are not trying to work against yourself or to slow yourself down. No, you've been working really hard to create change. And culture teaches us that disapproval of ourselves is a form of motivation. But the science and the lived experience of myself and so many people that I've worked with tells a different story. Change happens in an environment of enough safety, not perfection, not the absence of difficulty, but enough safety that your nervous system can tolerate the unfamiliar and stay in it long enough for a new pathway to form. So what does all of this actually mean for you in your day-to-day experience? It means that if you have been trying to change and it hasn't happened yet, or it hasn't happened the way you expected, that isn't the story you think it is. The story you've probably been telling yourself is, I keep failing. I should be further along. Other people can do this. What's wrong with me? I'll never figure this out. This will always be my cross to bear. But here's a different story, one that I think is a lot closer to the truth. You have been walking a well-worn path for a long time. And at some point you decided you wanted to go somewhere that path doesn't lead. So you stepped off into the brush and it was hard. And your brain kept pulling you back to the clear trail. And sometimes you went back, not because you gave up, not because you're lazy or you're broken, but because that's what brains do when the new way feels uncertain. And here's what I want you to consider. Some of you have been on that new path longer than you think. You've been asking different questions, noticing things you didn't used to notice, pausing even briefly where you used to just act. The surface might look the same, but the roots are forming. The question isn't whether something is growing. The question is whether you're going to stop watering it before you find out. What I see most often isn't people who couldn't change. It's people who stopped just before something was about to shift, because nothing looked different yet. They assumed that meant nothing was happening. They went back to the worn path. Not because they failed, but because they didn't know the seed was already in the ground. And yes, the brain likes what's familiar. It wants to go to that worn path. So practically, what this means is this: be slower to conclude that it isn't working. Be more curious about what is changing under the surface, even when you can't see it yet. And recognize that the shame, the self-criticism, the I should be farther along by now, all of that pulls you back toward the familiar path. It doesn't push you forward. Safety does. Curiosity does. Enough compassion to keep going even when the new way still feels hard. You don't have to have it figured out. You just have to keep walking and looking for the progress. If you haven't listened to my recent episode, Progress Over Perfection, I want you to visit that episode. This is looking for progress, is how we look for the evidence that something is happening under the surface. That the seeds are growing, the roots are growing, something is happening here. I'll link it in the show notes. Now, I want to leave you with this. If you have wanted to change your relationship with food, really genuinely wanted it, and you have found yourself stuck, I want you to consider the possibility that the stuckness is not proof that something is wrong with you or that you are not capable of this change. It's information about your nervous system, your history, and the very human way that brains work. You have not failed at change. You have been trying to change in ways that didn't account for how change actually works. And there may actually be more growing underneath the surface than you even realize. So keep watering. Keep watering that surface. Now, next week, I'm going to take this a step further. We're going to talk about a specific part of you that you might have been calling the problem, the obstacle, the thing that keeps getting in the way. And I'm going to offer you a completely different way of seeing it. So until then, keep watering the seeds, even when you can't see anything yet. That's what I have for you today. I'll see you next week. If you're tired of doing this alone and you want support as you work on your relationship with food, the Binge Eating Breakthrough book experience starts on February 17th. It's 7 weeks working through my book together as a group, meeting live on Tuesdays. It's $49, replays are included, and you don't need to have read the book to join. All the details are at janepilger.com/book-experience.